We began a program to clone you.
Cool.
Cindy the clown!
He is exactly like you in every way. Except 1/8 your size.
Breathtaking. I shall call him
MetaShackle.
Your stock is rising, number 2.
Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. It's Lane here with MetaShackle. Today I'm going to be going over the weekly charts of XLM, XRP, HBAR, and ALGO, as well as a few other things. So let's not waste any more time and let's get into the video. For additional information and exclusive perks, do consider joining me and the rest of our community on Patreon. Now, another thing that I just wanted to take a very quick look at is the fact that the XRP Rich List has been evolving quite a bit over the last year or so. One thing that you're noticing is all of the bigger wallets at the very top. The XRP is starting to migrate down into the smaller wallets. So what we're starting to see is the tiers are actually starting to get smaller. For example, the 1% is right now sitting at about 50,089 XRP, but it wasn't that long ago where you had to have 60,000 XRP. So we are starting to see the XRP filter down into the smaller wallets. And one reason why this is so important, and I made this graph to actually illustrate this point, is because it's going to continue to get harder and harder for people who are just getting into XRP to get a decent amount of XRP for a decent price. As you can see here, those of us that were buying at 30 cents and below, we were getting 1,000 XRP for about $300. People that started buying XRP at $1 were spending $1,000 to get the same amount of XRP. People who are buying at current levels, right around $3.50, are going to be spending 11.5 times more than what we were spending back here at 30 cents and below to get the same 1,000 XRP. And once price continues to move up into the higher ranges, which are coming, to acquire the same 1,000 XRP is going to be an incredible financial task to achieve for most people. So what we're going to continue to see is as the price of XRP goes up and people are investing, they're going to be getting less and less and less. So those of us who have been holding for many years and accumulated at much lower prices, we are going to have a substantial higher ranking than most of these people that are now just starting to get into the market and those who will be getting into the market further down the road. So if you are thinking about investing in XRP or any other cryptocurrency that has the ability to appreciate greatly in price, the time to start accumulating is now, regardless of price, just dollar cost averaging in until you get priced out of the market. Which in my case, for example, I started buying and I just didn't really care what the price was. When I got paid every week, I just kept buying a little bit at a time. Then at times when I was getting large amounts of money coming in, I was buying large amounts of XRP. But it added up over time, and I did this for about a 3-year period, which allowed me to build a substantial position in XRP over that time frame. But the ability to do that is going to continue to get harder and harder and harder, and a lot of people are going to regret not buying XRP when it was at 30 cents, $1, $3.50, and perhaps if we're lucky, people may even be regretting not buying at $25. So first off, taking a look at the XRP chart, this is the weekly chart. Price is currently bumped into this bearish SIBI right here, marked on the daily chart, centered at about $3.34.5. We bounced perfectly off of this weak doji reverse waterfall on the 4-hour right here, as you can see, coming down, hitting it nearly perfectly and reversing into the current price action that we're seeing. I was telling my Patreon members in the Master Tier video, which I release every Wednesday, that I believed that we were going to see price move into these upper fib levels before we see any major move downwards, which would basically put the price somewhere at about that $4.78 and as high as that $5.23. And if you've followed my videos, you know that I'm watching this area between these orange bars right here very closely, as I think if we're going to see a downturn, it's very likely that it could happen within this time frame. It's certainly not guaranteed, but it's just something that I'm looking out for, which corresponds with some of the ideas and theories that I've shared in the past, but I'm not going to go into any detail on that at this time. When taking a look at the XRP heat map, you can see that there is a little bit of liquidity resting down here at about that $3.20 range, with a lot more resting down here at the lows near $2.89. There is a lot of liquidity resting up here at about that $3.38 range, which we just barely got up to on this most recent run right here. And we have a very thick band of liquidity resting up here starting at about that 365 level, all the way up to about that 370 range. At this point, I think that price is likely going to seek after this buy-side liquidity at some point. And I think it's most likely going to happen sooner than later. Taking a look at the XLM Weekly Chart, you can see that price traded right up into this bearish SIBI on the weekly, which is centered at about 50 cents, 766. Price was promptly rejected from this area, and we've recently traded up right close to that same area, but we have not penetrated back into this. The higher Fibonacci ranges would take us anywhere from about 73 cents up to about 83 cents. If price gets rejected off of this area and retraces, you can expect to see it come down to these lower ranges, anywhere from that 26 cents to about that 30 cent range. And if things really got ugly, which is probably fairly unlikely at this point, these lower fib ranges, which are down here at about this 13 cents, upwards of about that 14.5 cents, but luckily we have this bullish fair value gap known as a BISI on the daily chart, starting at about that 19 cent range, which would likely act as support. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if at some point we saw price come back down to retest off of this upper trend line as I've been talking about. But like I said with XRP, I think it's more likely that we're going to visit this upper range here within these fib levels before we see any kind of a down move. Now taking a look at the XLM heat map, you can see that we do have some liquidity resting below this previous low right down here at about that 44 cent range, with a bigger band resting down here at about that 43 cent range. The largest amount of liquidity on the chart in the current trading range is resting above current price, starting at about that 47 cent range, but the thickest band of liquidity on the chart thus far is up here at a much higher range, centered about that 52.5 cents, which could be a very good thing for those of us holding XLM, as price is very likely going to move up to that area at some point, which would also put it right in line with the Fibonacci levels from the weekly chart. As I've said in the past, I do believe that we're going to see XLM outperform XRP on a percentage basis moving forward, as it was quite a bit behind on the breakout from the 7-year wedge range that we broke out of during the Trump election pump. So essentially XLM has quite a bit of catching up to do. And if you missed out on buying XRP at the lower ranges, one thing I've been recommending to a lot of my friends who have been asking about it is to instead buy XLM, as the price is much cheaper, which thus affords you the ability to build a much larger position for a much better price. In the realm of cryptocurrencies, I still believe that XRP and XLM are going to be two of the top 5 cryptocurrencies on planet Earth. Now taking a look at the ALGO charts, we're basically seeing about the same thing that we were seeing on the XLM charts. We have a bearish SIBI right here on the weekly, sitting about that 34.6 range. Price has been rejected off of this area one time previously. We have these upper Fibonacci ranges, anywhere from about 42 cents to about that 46 cents and a half range, with the fib retracement levels resting down here at 18 cents on the low end and 20 cents on the high end. And if things got really ugly, the lower Fibonacci ranges sitting down here at 9 cents on the low end and about 11 cents on the high end. But overall, I do believe that we're going to see this move upwards into this Fibonacci range, just like with XRP and XLM. When taking a look at the liquidation heat map, you can see that there is quite a bit of liquidity concentrated here just above these previous highs, moving up to about that 27.8 range. We have some thick bands of liquidity resting much higher at about 31 cents all the way to about 32 cents, and quite a thick band resting right here at about that 34 cent range, which would be perfect if you looked at it from a smart money concepts perspective, because if price came up here sweeping all this liquidity out, taking this band out right here, it would sweep this previous high in doing so. So that would fit the ICT concepts very well. We're also setting higher highs and higher lows, so we are in an uptrend in the current time. I actually hold a very nice bag of ALGO, and although it has not performed as well as I thought that it would up to this point, I will continue to hold it in my long-term holdings moving upwards into the 2030 range because I think it's going to be a big part of what we're about to see in the new global digital financial system. Now taking a look at HBAR, this is also on the weekly chart, you can see that all these charts are exhibiting very similar patterns. HBAR broke out of this wedge pattern here, got rejected flat cold right here on this bearish SIBI, which is centered at about 29.6 on the weekly. If we take out this pattern high right here, moving into these upper Fibonacci ranges, that would put us anywhere from about 46 cents to about 52 cent range. If price retraces down towards this weak doji waterfall on the weekly, which is a likely area that we could see a reversal, we could see price range anywhere from about 15 cents to about 18 cents. And if things got really ugly, we could see price come down to 7 cents to 8 cents, somewhere in this Fibonacci range. But the same as the other charts, we have this bullish fair value gap in the form of a BISI on the weekly chart, right here near the apex of the descending triangle to act as support. If price did come down to this range for some reason, I would expect that it would likely retest off of this upper trend line before we saw reversal. I really don't think we'd come down to this level. But nowadays, you never know, as the warmongers in government seem hell-bent on causing World War III to distract the public from coming to the fruition of what they have been doing behind the scenes. And we all know that these people will go to any length to cover up their crimes. So if it did come down to these ranges, it certainly wouldn't surprise me, but I certainly don't expect it at this point, barring a major black swan event. Taking a look at the HBAR heat map, the thickest band of liquidity on the current chart is resting right down here in that 22 cent range, just below this previous low. There's not a ton of liquidity on the chart underneath other than that, with the exception of right here in this area, which is basically sitting just below this previous low, at about that 25 cent mark, down here to about that 24.9. But there is quite a bit of liquidity resting up above the price, anywhere from this previous high here, sitting at about 26.8, all the way up to this range here, resting just below 30 cents. But if price did come up here, similar to what we saw in the ALGO chart, taking out this last band of liquidity here, it would sweep this previous high, which would be in line with smart money concepts as well, which you've probably noticed a lot of times when this liquidity gets taken out. That's exactly what you see, is the previous high getting swept before price retraces downward. All in all, with what we've seen in the crypto markets recently, especially with the SEC finally dropping its frivolous lawsuit against Ripple, we could see a lot of great things moving into the crypto market moving forward. There's been a lot of legislation passed. A lot of these criminal government agencies are now stepping out of the way, allowing the free market to perform as it was meant to, as we are supposed to be a republic, not a communist nation, even though these government actors seem to think that we are a communist nation. But this makes me hopeful moving forward that we could see some incredible amounts of price appreciation in regard to the right assets. I would also recommend sticking to the ISO 222 tokens and keeping your spec plays, which are all non-ISO tokens, to a minimum of 15% or less of your overall portfolio, as the name of the game when it comes to crypto is risk reduction. And if you look at the current stock market sitting at all-time highs, with the real estate market basically on the verge of collapsing, much like we saw in 2008. Literally at the drop of the hat, things could change on us. So you need to make sure that you are reducing your risk. And if you're a trader, you need to make absolutely certain that you are using a stop loss at all times.
You can't even... Zip it. Zip. I want you... Stop. This... Oh! You know, you're like a child talking. If you just, Frown, would you please?
Subtitle. Zip it.
So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Good luck and have a great day.